Hello, in this video I'm going to talk about the coronavirus and the narcissistic behaviour that I think is behind why it's spread as quickly as it has across China and across the world. I was in Kuala Lumpur last week where there's a huge Chinese population, and after the Chinese New Year had finished, when everyone was coming back to the city, people were suddenly wearing face masks, surgical masks on their faces. And once I had just been watching the Western media, you know, learning about how this virus was really not it didn't seem like a big problem, it seemed like a very small one. But the more I watched on YouTube, the more I started to realise that what the Western media were learning wasn't really reflected by the true numbers of people who had the virus in China. No one was listening to the news. When I spoke to Chinese people about this, they all pretty much said that whatever the Chinese government say, it's not going to be true, and the problem's much worse than they're making it out as. So many people suddenly started wearing the surgical mask that pharmacies were sold out of them. And I went into a pharmacy and I asked the pharmacist, do these actually protect you? Because I'd read that they really don't, it doesn't really make any difference unless somebody actually sneezes on you. It's not going to protect you from the air you breathe because it can just come in through the side. But she said yes, apparently, you know, according to her, it makes this massive difference. So I ended up wearing one as well. So I had a bit of a sense of you know, of how it might be for people in China who fear that somebody that they meet in the street might have it. You know, I was using this alcohol solution. They'd even run out of alcohol solution in all the pharmacies. I had to use this little alcohol wipe because that was all they had left. So if it made me a bit anxious being in the middle of all of this, you know, being in Wuhan, the actual centre of it all, let alone elsewhere in China, must be absolutely terrifying.
China is urging its citizens not to travel abroad as it struggles to contain the virus that has now killed more than 100 people. The total number of confirmed cases is now at more than 4,500.
Well, I think it's dramatically underestimated. Based on
dramatically a factor of what?
Tens of thousands. And, you know, there's some analyses coming out that said that there may be as many as 300,000 cases in China right now.
And we're talking about 4,000. And you're talking about hundreds
the official
of
number versus, right.
Well, the problem is we don't know what they're really looking at. I think the Chinese haven't been forthcoming with information, so we've been patting them on the back for being good actors in this case because they're behaving better than they did with SARS. They're still not behaving well. They've concealed key information, including that this was spreading to healthcare workers, which they didn't admit to last week. So we don't really know the full scope.
封城之前的头一天，22号，包括22号之前，整个武汉市满大街。戴口罩的人都不多，一大堆就是不戴口罩的，还在麻将室里面打麻将，还在到处交头接耳，包括一些小商小贩。武汉市市长、党委书记在干什么？作为一个地方的高级官员、一把手，他们难道没有得到信息吗？如果说他们第一时间得到了信息，为什么没有全程的电视讲话？没有第一时间的，甚至强制性的。
A lot of people pointed the finger at Wuhan's mayor, saying if he'd known, then he should have told people about the virus. He was on an interview that was televised, and he explained that he couldn't do that. He had to wait for permission. He hadn't been authorised to tell people.
As a local official, I could only disclose the information after being authorised. A lot of people didn't understand this.
Pin Ho is the founder of a Chinese media company based in New York, and he thinks that what the mayor did was he subtly pointed the finger at the Chinese government without actually doing so, that when he offered to step down and and resign. And he said, I'll take the blame. What he was really doing was being defiant, because he knew that you can't step down. It's up to the Chinese government if you are going to lose your job as a local government official. So, and while he didn't point the finger at anyone in particular in government, he did make it clear that it was because he wasn't given permission, and by law you have to be given permission to inform people about the spread of a virus. You have to get that permission from the central government in Beijing. The first symptoms of the coronavirus were noticed on the 1st of December. And by the end of December, by the 30th, there were 7 people in hospital with this virus. And a doctor who was aware of this had messaged in a group, an online chat group with some past medical students, some alumni. He was talking about this virus and saying it was the SARS virus. And it turned out that it wasn't. He later clarified that he wasn't sure what the virus was. They were still trying to work it out. But it is related to the SARS virus, so he wasn't far off. And he discussed it in this group. And by the next day, there were 27 cases in the hospital, or hospitals in Wuhan. Police made the doctor sign a document to promise that he wouldn't disclose any more information about the outbreak. The doctor himself became ill with the virus. And the reason the police were able to do this is because there's a law against spreading rumours, as the Chinese government call them. So any information that the Chinese government call a rumour, you're not allowed to spread. On January the 1st, police in Wuhan put a statement online saying that 8 rumour mongers, as they called them, had been dealt with according to the law for spreading rumours about pneumonia. And so people found out about what had happened and were really angry about it. They were angry with the police that they had quashed these rumours when, action could have been taken against the virus.
Right. Also remember, they only rolled diagnostics out to most of the healthcare facilities in late January. So there's a whole bunch of cases they didn't even test. So there must be people who passed away from viral-like pneumonia that weren't even tested, that we'll never capture.
So why is the Director General of the World Health Organization praising China for being so transparent about the virus?
The speed with which China detected the outbreak, isolated the virus, sequenced the genome, and shared it with WHO and the world are very impressive and beyond words. So is China's commitment to transparency and to supporting other countries.
Well, the reason is because on the 31st of December, China did tell the World Health Organization about the cases of the virus. They just didn't tell China. So they still kept all the citizens of Wuhan completely in the dark. Because the hospitals were kept in the dark, they weren't able to get supplies until the end of January. On the 23rd of January, when the city was finally locked down, the hospitals didn't have enough supplies. They hadn't had enough time to gather them. Had they been made aware of the very first cases at the beginning of December, they would have had nearly 2 months to gather supplies. Doctors were making goggles out of plastic folders. They didn't have enough testing kits, so a lot of people were sent home. A lot of people, they couldn't tell them if they had the virus or not. They ran out of masks.
全部都瘫痪了，或者说混乱不堪。我很多内部的在医院工作的朋友给我反馈的信息就是，你进了医院，也就是给你打点消炎药，给你打点激素，说白了，然后一样也是等死，就是很赤裸裸的等死。你自个儿身体强壮能扛过去，你就扛过去了；你扛不过去，也就挂掉了。而且在封城的前半个月、1个月，返乡春运回去了，已经走了100-200万人了。他们怎么办？ 你怎么防？要把整个中国都给封住吗？
Between the beginning of January, when the police were boasting about how they had, how they had stopped these rumours from spreading about the pneumonia, from that date until the 23rd of January, 5 million people left the city of Wuhan. This might have been partly down to the Chinese New Year celebrations, but those 5 million people spread the disease across the country.
Hello. The coronavirus outbreak, which has killed 170 people so far and infected thousands across mainland China, has now spread to every one of the country's 31 provinces.
There are now 98 cases in 18 countries outside China, including 8 cases of human-to-human transmission in 4 countries: Germany, Japan, Vietnam, and the United States of America. We don't know what sort of damage this virus could do if it were to spread in a country with a weaker health system. We must act now to help countries prepare for that possibility. For all of these reasons, I'm declaring a public health emergency of international concern over the global outbreak of novel coronavirus.
The virus has already spread to Xinjiang, which is in the west of China. It's a province where there are camps stuffed full of about 1 million Muslims that the Chinese authorities are holding. And they have really poor sanitation and poor healthcare there. So there's a worry that these people are going to get the virus and that they won't be in a position to be able to withstand it.
The Philippines reporting the first coronavirus death outside of China. It's a man who traveled from Wuhan, the epicenter of the outbreak.
Yeah, hospital workers in the thousands are threatening to go on strike in Hong Kong right now because of the fact that Hong Kong still hasn't completely closed its border with China. This comes as several countries around the world, the US and Japan, South Korea all included, are shuttering their borders to China, restricting travel, not allowing any Chinese travelers to come to their respective countries. Hong Kong still hasn't done the same, and in response, a lot of airlines are cutting down their flights to Hong Kong as well. So as the situation gets increasingly more serious, people here in Hong Kong are afraid that, the inaction from the government may result in something similar to the SARS outbreak in the early 2000s, where we saw lots of people here in Hong Kong suffer from the repercussions. 300 out of the 700 who died at the time were Hong Kongers.
当地政府有关部门根本就不作为，或者说他们别有目的。至于说是什么，我们不展开探讨。
So why wasn't this permission given from Beijing's central government to the mayor of Wuhan? Why wasn't he allowed to tell the people of Wuhan so they could start to protect themselves, and protect people in the cities around them? The reason it's thought is that the aides of the leader of the Communist Party, his aides are saying that he doesn't like to hear bad news. And so because of that, people are afraid to tell him. So no one wanted to tell him about the virus, and as a result, they had to keep the mayor's mouth shut in Wuhan. President Xi's leadership is often called a personality cult. He has similar kind of authority as Chairman Mao. So he has enormous power. When Xi was a small boy, his father went to prison. He had been in the political elite in Chairman Mao's Communist Party, but he allegedly read the wrong book, and so for that reason went to prison. And Xi was sent with his family to the countryside, and they had to live in a cave. So having gone from central Beijing, where the rest of the political elite lived in luxury, he was living in a cave.
1969年的1月份， 全部都哭啊！那整个专列上没有不哭的人，就是我在笑，就是我在笑，哎。当时底下我那些亲属说你怎么还笑？我说我不走才得哭啊！我不走在这儿不就有命没命我都不知道了，我这走不是好。
I think it's interesting that he said that while everyone else was crying, he was smiling. I wonder if he developed the ability to split off from vulnerable feelings even at that age. They had very little to eat. They were really struggling and very, very poor. And his sister was later murdered by the regime. So he would have gone through situations that would have been traumatic. And yet it doesn't seem that he became vulnerable in any way. Instead, he ended up joining the very party that had imprisoned his father and murdered his sister and put him and his family through really difficult times. He ended up joining them with something to prove, it seems, and he ended up leading with an iron fist. So in terms of narcissism, in terms of how someone develops into a narcissist from childhood, they very often experience traumatic events. Even neglect, even emotional neglect can be traumatic for someone. So they often experience trauma, but they split off from that feeling around the trauma, and they end up having this persona, a kind of mask that's really tough. And it looks like that's what she has done. I don't get any sense that she can tolerate any kind of feeling of vulnerability. When he came to the Communist Party, he transformed it. He got rid of opposition, people who had opposed him from the Communist Party. He wiped out many people, apparently about 1 million people from the Communist Party. And so as a result, he managed to lead without any kind of opposition within his party. And he also transformed local governments. Before he came into power, there had been relatively stable institutions and departments that were run in a kind of faceless way. But he said that he wanted to wipe out corruption. And in doing that, what it seems that he was really doing was getting rid of all of these separate institutions and putting them all under him, so that he had direct authority over everything, including the army. Before Xi, there was a two-term policy, which meant that a leader could only continue in office for 2 terms. But Xi got rid of this policy, which means that he can rule for the rest of his life. I've read articles from journalists who've said that censorship got so much worse after Xi was in power, and at the time that he changed the 2-term leadership length to being forever, the censorship was particularly strong. People were sending each other messages saying N is greater than 2, because they weren't allowed to, of course, speak about what was really going on and share their opinions. And even that wasn't allowed. The letter N was banned on that day. You can see that even before he became the leader, Xi was very sensitive to criticism.
有些这个吃饱了没事干的外国人呢，对我们的事情指手画脚，中国一不输出革命，二不输出饥饿和贫困，三不去折腾你们，还有什么好说的？
I read an article in the paper that quoted some foreign policy scholars. They say that a robust body of political science research has concluded that personalist dictatorships, rather than bureaucratic dictatorships, tend to produce the worst outcomes of any type of political regime. They tend to produce the most risky and aggressive foreign policies. They are the most likely to invest in nuclear weapons, the most likely to fight wars against democracies, and the most likely to initiate interstate conflicts. It wouldn't have mattered so much that the mayor had to wait for permission to spread the news about the virus if the media could have done it for him. But she holds a really tight grip on the media coming out of China and within China. The censorship is really strong. CCTV is China's main news broadcaster.
China's President Xi Jinping paid a rare visit to state media facilities in Beijing, including CCTV. She offered words of encouragement to aspiring Chinese journalists.
你们好。
总书记好。
Good morning, President Xi.
I see that your team is an international team. I hope you can report developments on the Chinese economy and society objectively and comprehensively.
Everything on CCTV has to fit with what the Chinese government want China to know about. CGTN is CCTV's international media arm. It reaches 140 million homes in 100 countries, and it employs journalists from all over the world. They get really good pay there compared to many other media companies, and while media companies are currently suffering, you know, they're losing staff, they're having to fire people because they're losing money, CGTN is gaining in money and popularity. But CGTN has a list of principles that must be followed for somebody to be employed as a journalist there. It says that people may not promote the West's idea of journalism and undermine our country's principle that the media should be infused with the spirit of the party. Every journalist who works for CGTN must agree that all the work by the party's media must reflect the party's will. They must safeguard the party's authority and safeguard the party's unity. They must love the party, protect the party, and closely align themselves with the party's leadership in thought, politics, and action. So there's no freedom in the media, even though it's reaching all over the world. It's quite frightening how many people are tuning in to watch this broadcasting that's completely biased towards the Communist Party in China. I've been reading CNN's online platform, and it talks about how Xi has never been to Wuhan and has instead sent his second in command, Li, and it quotes a professor, Willie Lam, who's a professor at the Chinese University of Hong Kong's Centre for China Studies, and he's also a political analyst, and he says the reason he thinks this has happened is so that any further problems and Li is going to be the one to take the blame. So Xi is sort of standing in the background. He hasn't showed his face very much since the outbreak was made national and international news. He's put somebody else's face at the forefront of this huge problem. According to statistics, China protects its people from measles better than the US does. So they're perfectly capable of, of running things efficiently in the medical realm. You know, they could have done something to prevent this virus from spreading. They have the ability to do that if they get themselves organised. But Xi's government have been accused of mishandling the swine flu outbreak in 2018, so that a quarter of the world's pigs had to be put to death. His government have also been accused of mishandling the situation with Hong Kong, just inflaming the problem, making people more and more angry. And a columnist of the New York Times, Nicholas Kristof, he says that he thinks the reason for these issues are that Xi surrounds himself only with optimistic voices and flattery, and when you do that it's hard to make good decisions because you don't hear any independent voices, and so you just don't have enough information to make useful decisions. So I've made lots of videos about narcissists, and if we look at Xi through that lens, I think it's quite interesting to see how everything is just on a massive scale here. Even from his childhood, we don't know about his parents. Well, we know that his father was a revolutionary, and that he ended up, that he was in the party of Chairman Mao. So his beliefs aligned with Chairman Mao's, at least to some degree. So that might say something about him. But then we also know that the abuser, or certainly one abuser, who's a very obvious abuser of Xi, was Chairman Mao and his henchmen. Xi's father was persecuted by him, went to prison, his sister was murdered by him. And so when I've talked on a smaller scale about how a child of a narcissist either becomes like the parent and becomes a narcissist themselves, or they go the other way and they're very they might be really empathic, but they might also be really, really sensitive and vulnerable. And if you take this now, I mean, maybe his father was a narcissist, but what we do know is that he was impacted on by a narcissist, by Chairman Mao and his henchmen. And so he has ended up growing up to be like them, to be another Chairman Mao. And then if you think about the people who've allowed him to do this, so I've talked about enablers and flying monkeys in other videos, and usually I've mentioned one or two of them, but in this context, the journalists might be at least enablers, if not flying monkeys. The people who work for him in the government, he got rid of everybody who wasn't an enabler, and so all that are left are going to be enablers, and mostly flying monkeys, because flying monkeys are the people who carry out a narcissist's work for them, and that's what all the people do in his government. And then if you think right down to local government, to the mayor that couldn't say anything, to the policeman who took the person aside and made him write a letter, the doctor, and all the people of China, they are all enablers themselves, because they're all letting this happen, all of this abuse happen all the time, because they have no power. So it seems that because Xi can't handle negativity or any kind of criticism, because he needs to live in this illusion, and he needs the world, he needs his country to completely conform to his illusions, that everything is under his control and everything is okay. The whole world has suffered. 5 million people have left the city of Wuhan and spread the disease across China and across the world. And the hospitals in Wuhan have been struggling. People have probably died unnecessarily as a result of that. And this is all because of one man who can't handle reality.
人，起码我或者说我身边的同龄人，20、30来岁的80后、90后。没有谁是傻逼，没有一个人被洗脑了。我们脑袋里清清楚楚，明白的不得了。像金灿荣那一批，也就忽悠一下傻白甜，也就忽悠一下小朋友罢了。像我们都太他妈了解这个国家是什么性质了，我们是没有办法，我们没有发声的渠道，我们没有能力，我们的身体是肉，是血肉。比不过钢筋子弹和坦克。所有看到我视频的人，真的好好珍惜我发这个视频，真的是太不容易了。我随时都是冒着被抓到公安局派出所的风险 在这里就希望把一些真实的、客观的情况告诉大家。我们老百姓真的是很无奈，并不是所有人都被洗脑了，我们也希望是吧，过上那种民主、自由、开放。我们也希望不翻墙就能上 YouTube、上 Twitter， 但问题是根本就做不到。我们能怎样呢？是吧？高房价、高物价、通货膨胀，他们赵家人出了任何问题就捡我们老百姓的韭菜、剪羊毛，大家都看得雪亮的。你看我身边的朋友、同学，只要是有钱的、有能力的、能移民的，早他妈走了。谁都不傻，我们只是没有办法。希望大家帮帮我们，我们起码眼下我们武汉人真的是太需要国际舆论、国际社会的关注了。我们眼下真的是太无奈了，就2个字：无奈。